What's happening, Champion Squad? Welcome you beautiful faces back to the channel. Today's video, we are taking a look at the Season 6 weapon tier list, ranking every weapon from worst to best in Apex Legends. And with the recent character tier list video that I put out, you guys showed a lot of love on that one, so I figured I could do one for the weapon tier list, and it was highly requested in the comment section. So if you guys happen to enjoy today's video, like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe and join the Champion Squad. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop on board with ranking every weapon from worst to best, and we're going to do it from the classes again. So S is the best and all the way down to D, which is the worst. So that is S, A, B, C, and D. And right off the bat, I do want to say that this is my opinion, so I'm solely doing this on my preference, and it definitely was a hard list to make since there's so many strong weapons in Season 6. So if you guys have your opinions, definitely leave your list down in the comments. I'm curious as to what you guys think. So starting off in the D class, the first weapon that's going to be in the D class is the RE45. Now the RE45 did receive a slight buff in Season 5, and it stands still in Season 6, and it's a well-rounded weapon. You know, it's a good early off the drop weapon. If you don't have a gun, you find it on the ground, you're going to pick it up for sure, and hopefully you can get a kill with it. It's not too tough to manage the recoil. The mag size, it's a little bit iffy. Purple mag is, you know, that's when it gets super dominant. But is it a gun that you can use end zone? Is it a gun that you can use mid-game? And that the answer is, in my opinion at least, no. It's not a gun that you're going to want to take this to end zone, especially in ranked. You're just going to get outclassed, outgunned when you're using this gun. That's why it's in the D list. The second weapon that's going to be in the D list is the Mozambique. Yes, I know, and a lot of you are going to argue that, what about the Mozambique with hammer points? The Mozambique with hammer points is an absolute god, but that is highly situational, and that's also if you find a hammer point attachment for it. So I also wanted to make this tier list, you know, overall. How is this gun overall? How is it going to treat you overall between early, mid, and end game? How is this weapon going to handle? And that's why I put the Mozambique as well in the D class. Even with the hammer points, it's very situational, and that's why I put the Mozambique in the D class. And following the Mozambique, you probably already guessed it since I put the Mozambique in this D class, which is the P2020. The P20 is also going to be in the D class, and again, don't get me wrong, this gun is dominant with hammer points, but that's again if you find hammer points, and it's going to be situational. You can only really use it when you have somebody cracked. The long range accuracy isn't there for the most part. Medium range is a bit iffy. You know, it's dominant close range, don't get me wrong, but again, situational. Overall, it's not going to be the best weapon. And that was the third and final weapon for the D class. So we have the RE45, Mozambique, and the P20. So let's go ahead and move into the C class. And the first weapon we're going to take a look at in the C class is going to be the LStar. Now, the LStar, I remember when it first came out, it was actually a care package weapon, and I always shied away from it. It was never a gun that's like, oh, I got this from a care package, I got to pick it up immediately. It was never a gun like that. It was never OP, and that's why I put it in the C class, because still, when they made it a ground weapon, it's just not there. When you find it early off the game and you pick it up, don't get me wrong, you're going to get some kills with it. You might find some great success, but again, end game, even mid game, you're not going to want to use this weapon. You're just going to get outclassed and outgunned with some higher tier weapons we're going to go ahead and get into later in this video. So moving along in the C class, paired up alongside the LStar is gonna be the Sentinel. Now, the Sentinel did get a minor buff. I believe it was in Season 5. I don't think this was in Season 6, and the only change that happened to this weapon was you can use shield cells instead of a battery to do the amped shot, the charged up shot that always cracks shields when you charge this weapon. And I believe it takes 2 cells. Comment down below, let me know if I'm wrong, but I think it's 2 cells to charge up however much bullets you have in the gun, and it goes down slightly, and every time you shoot, that amped power will also go down. Now, the reason I put the Sentinel in the C class, however, not just because it's a sniper. You know, there are going to be snipers that are going to be higher up here, and you're going to see later in the video, but I put the Sentinel as the worst sniper because of that bolt action, because it takes so long to shoot that second shot. Don't get me wrong, you will get some shield cracks with this, especially when you have it amped up. I mean, that thing is just going to crack people from any range, but it's a situational weapon. You don't really want to be caught using this close range. You got to pray and hope that your shot's going to hit if you use it close range. So with it being so situational, it's going to be in the lower tier, so that's why I threw it in the C class, and those are my thoughts for the Sentinel. But in terms of using it and having fun with it, I think it's arguably one of my favorite snipers to use, especially to trick shot with. I have some nice clips that I posted on Twitter a while back when I hit using the Sentinel, so definitely a fun gun to mess around with and to play around and maybe even trick shot with. But in terms of competitive, in terms of ranked, in terms of getting your best bang for your buck when using the weapon, it's just not going to be the Sentinel. So moving on into the next weapon that's in the C class is going to be the Havoc. Now the Havoc, oh my god, it went from an okay weapon to insanely OP to now in season 6 not usable. Now I think personally it's just too unreliable. It's not that consistent. Even if you have good recoil control, the recoil is here, there, it's everywhere. Okay, sometimes you'll get some nice shots to connect, but most of the time it's just unpredictable, and you're gonna find yourself a lot of the times, especially those mid-range gunfights, where you think you're gonna be hitting them, but the recoil is gonna bounce to the left or bounce to the right, and everything just ruins for you. Close range, however, this gun is an absolute monster. Again, touching base on situational though, I want to rank the gun as its overall effectiveness. And for the Havoc, I found that medium range is okay. It's not decent, I just say it's okay. Close range is dominant, especially with the turbocharger. But again, it is going to fall in the C class. It took a big hit in season 6, and I'm afraid the Havoc is dead. Rest in peace, Havoc. And moving on to the last weapon in the C class, which is going to be the charge rifle. Now, the charge rifle did receive a nerf in season 6, which a lot of you guys might actually overlooked it because it wasn't anything crazy. Basically, they increased the magazine size to 8, but whenever you use a shot, you waste 2 bullets instead of 1. So what does that mean? That means you're still going to get your 4 shots out of the entire magazine, but you're going to be wasting more sniper ammo using the charge rifle. Now, with the charge rifle, this is another situational weapon. You're not going to be finding yourself using this close range. The hip fire is an absolute mess. It's always in shambles. Long range dominant. Any type of sniper scope on the charge rifle, you're going to be hitting for a lot, especially if you have that good tracking, mouse and key, or even controller, you're going to be hitting a lot with the charge rifle. But when it comes to having a overall effective secondary weapon, the charge rifle is just not there. It's okay if you're going to use it early off the game and try to level up your evo, maybe find a good scope for it. You can post up on some high grounds and farm your evo up until you get purple, maybe even red. But being a long-term weapon, using it until end game, I just don't see it being that effective. So that is going to conclude the C class of weapons. Let's go ahead and move on to the B class. And the first weapon in the B class is the Wingman. Now, the Wingman is arguably one of my favorite weapons to use during pub matches. I used to use it during ranked. I tend to shy away from it now because there's so many OP weapons in the game, especially in season 6, where if you're not hitting majority of the shots, you're going to find yourself in shambles using the Wingman. So it's really a gun that you got to be practicing with every day. You got to be using it at least 3 consecutive days in a row. Then the Wingman is going to shine, especially with the skull piercer. But the B class, and as I said in the character tier list, anything in the B class is going to be balanced in my opinion. So if you pick up the Wingman and you start hitting some shots with it, it's an okay weapon to use. It's pretty good. Do I think it's going to be more effective than every other gun in the game? Absolutely not. That's why I put it in the B class. It's going to be that mid-tier level, but it's definitely a gun to have fun with and play around in pubs with. Moving on to the next weapon in the B class is going to be the Alternator. Now, the Alternator, it was a monster. I believe in season 2, that's when they added disruptor rounds, but they took it out obviously, and now it's just the Alternator. It's a pebble shooter. Sometimes it works for you, sometimes it doesn't. You know, if someone has really good armor, it's going to be hard to stay in that gunfight when they're using a better weapon than you. You have to be hitting majority of the shots, if not every shot, to actually compete when using the Alternator. A gun mid-game, potentially you can use it, not a problem. I tend to find myself using the Alternator, especially now in season 6 where there's no R99. That Alternator is going to be my substitute weapon until I find an R301. So I catch myself a lot actually using the Alternator mid-game, and it's still pretty dominant. So that's why I consider it in the B class. It's a balanced weapon. Definitely a really good gun early off the rip because you can find yourself hitting most of the shots with it. The fire rate isn't insane. The recoil is pretty manageable. So I think overall it's a well-rounded weapon. Let's move on to the next weapon in the B class, and that is going to be the Flatline. Now, the Flatline, I would say it is a bit situational. You can't be using the Flatline long range. You're going to find yourself destroyed by the recoil. Close to medium range is the good sweet spot for the Flatline. It's a super hard hitter weapon. And if you're connecting majority of the shots in the gunfight, you're probably going to outgun like an R301 or a Volt maybe. But that's if you're connecting every single shot in the Flatline. Sometimes it is difficult to control the Flatline's recoil. You're going to have some pops here and there where you're going to start ghosting shots. And that's why I put that Flatline in the B class, because to me, I don't think it's as reliable as some other weapons. And when you're playing competitive, when you're playing ranked in that high tier lobbies, you need to find a gun that you know you can hit shots with when it's absolutely needed. And with the Flatline, sometimes I take it to end game in some ranked lobbies when I'm playing pred lobbies. but most of the time I do find myself dropping it over some other weapons. So with that being said, let's move on to the next weapon in the B class, and that is going to be the Spitfire. Now the Spitfire actually got a slight buff in season 6 where the recoil is a little bit more controllable. It's a little bit easier to manage. Is it noticeable? Maybe, if you use the Spitfire a lot. I don't notice it too much because I don't use the Spitfire like every day to be noticing these small changes with it. But now you should be able to connect with more consistent shots with the Spitfire, especially long range or even medium range. It's a gun that shines where enemies have to either reload or weapon swap. Since you have that big magazine on you and you're not going to have to reload this weapon, you can probably get 3 kills in total without reloading once. You don't need to be hitting every shot, but when the enemy is trying to reload on you or weapon swap on you, that's when you're going to get into that advantage. So let's say if the enemy has a first shot on you and they get the better of the exchange and you're using the Spitfire, then you're tagging them. Then when they have to reload or when they have to weapon swap, that's when you come back into that gunfight and you start taking advantage of the gunfight and actually win the gunfight when you're using the Spitfire because it has that big magazine size. Now I put it in the B class because it's a heavy handler. You know, you're going to be running really slow with it. Your strafe speed isn't there. Overall effectiveness I think is pretty good, but again, you're resistant to that strafe speed and it still does have some pop to it. You're not going to be hitting almost every single shot when you're using it, and that's why I put it in the B class. I do think it's balanced, but sometimes it can be annoying when other people are using the Spitfire and they're just shooting and shooting and shooting without having to reload. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next weapon in the B class, which is going to be the EVA 8. Now this shotgun is a shotgun where when you find a bolt for it, when you find a good bolt, just like any other shotgun I would say actually, but when you find a good bolt with the EVA, this thing absolutely destroys. Double tap on this, you can probably get a 2-burst kill with double tap purple bolt on this EVA, especially if you're close range. This thing hits like a tank. Now the only downside to this shotgun, which again is going to be a situational downside, is it can only be used when you're really up close. When you're aiming in with this, like, it's not like the PK where he has a choke, you can use it medium range. Not the case. This, you only have to whip it out, or you only can whip it out, should I say, when you're close range. Falling into that situational factor, do you really want to use this? Do you really want to be using and limiting yourself to this sort of weapon combo where you're using an EVA, and when you swap to it, it's just going to get you in shambles. You know, if you're fighting a mid-range gunfight and you have to reload your primary, you swap over to the EVA, you're not going to hit those shots. You're not going to hit the damage that's going to be enough to kill that person. Do I think it's a good weapon off the rip, early, especially off the rip? Yes, absolutely. It's going to be dominant off the rip, even without a bolt. But when we're talking end game or even mid game, it's going to be situational. And then I don't really like to be using weapons like that. I always want to be, if I have this weapon, I know I'm going to be able to dominate with it. If I weapon swap to another weapon, I know I'm going to be able to dominate with it, no matter what range. So that's why I put the EVA in the B class. And finally, guys, moving on to the last weapon in the B class, which is going to be a sniper, and that is the Longbow. Now, the Longbow, when Apex first came out, I'm talking season 1 or even preseason, the Longbow was a god. Snipers went into shambles as soon as they made their own category where they had sniper attachments and sniper ammo. That's when I think Apex sort of dropped the ball with these snipers, and they started being used less. When the Longbow was a heavy weapon and you could use a heavy extended mag on it, it was super dominant. The loot pool was much better. But the Longbow as a weapon, it's still dominant. It still shines how it used to shine, you know, back in season 2, back in season 1. But now you're looking for more. I feel like I'm always looking for attachments when I'm using this Longbow. Back in the earlier seasons, I would get this thing decked out in no time. But now, with the sniper attachments, it's just a mess. It's an absolute ruckus. And that's why I sort of tend to shy away some of the snipers. The next sniper we're going to get into, we'll see. But the Longbow, again, it's dominant with the skull piercer. You're going to be hitting people for about 55. And then with the skull piercer headshots, 90 to 100 plus. It's got a faster fire rate than the Sentinel. It does have some bullet drop though, so you got to be aware of that. But overall, I would say it's a better weapon to use over the Sentinel if you're talking about that competitive state. So that's why I put it in the B class. It's definitely a balanced sniper. And that is going to conclude all the weapons in the B class. So now let's move into the A class. Now we're getting a little bit spicy here. This is where the guns that you really want to be using, you really want to be picking up to dominate your games. The first weapon in the A class is going to be the triple take. Now this is the sniper I'm talking about. This sniper, the triple take, got a massive buff in season 6 where they increased the magazine size that you get with an extended mag. they increased the fire rate, and they also built in a choke right into the gun as soon as you pick it up off the ground. Now precision choke is no longer an attachment on the ground, and it's actually a good thing because it was only used for one weapon, which is the triple take. So it wouldn't make sense to be an attachment on the ground unless the PK was back to floor loot. Then maybe that choke is going to come huge, you know, maybe it's not going to be as OP. But now they pre-built it into the triple take. The triple take is an absolute god, and there's nothing really else to say. I mean, it slows people when you shoot at them. The shots are super easy to connect. The default scope on it when you pick up is super dominant. And I've actually made a video, the best sniper in season 5, and I said it was the triple take in season 5. Now it's a god. So imagine, and now you know why I put it up in the A class, because the triple take is dominant. In pred lobbies, dominant. You can use it as a shotgun, you can use it as a sniper, mid-range, close range, long range, doesn't matter. This gun will have you covered as long as you have a good shot though. That's the key thing. Even though the shots are easy to connect with, especially with the triple take, you are going to need to find that quick scoping mentality for the most part, or that snapshot mentality, being able to flick to enemies when you need to, especially close range. That's where you're going to find some great success with the triple take. So moving on to the next weapon in the A class is going to be the G7 Scout, another super dominant weapon. And this is actually arguably, I had a tough decision here whether I should put it in the S class or the A class, but the G7, I had to throw it up in the A class because there are some weapons there that are just they're super good. But the G7 in the A class, make no mistake about it, the weapon's dominant. You're going to find some great success with it, especially in ranked, and your teammates are both running it, or one other teammate is running with it, and you have a good scope, like a 2 times, 3 times, or 2 to 4 times, and you're peppering kids and focusing firing kids, you're going to get an easy knock with this G7. You can say a bit situational, but hip fires, if you can manage, they're not too bad to be able to hit them. So worst comes to worst, if you do have to whip this out close range, sometimes you can land your hip fire shots, no problem. It's got a good magazine size when you get an extended mag on it, and it hits like a tank. So what more can you ask for? It's an overall well-rounded weapon, semi-automatic weapon, and I shy away from the double tap though. I said this in a coaching series video. The double tap sometimes I find not hitting as much shots as I normally would if I was using it on semi-automatic. When I'm using it on semi without the double tap, I find I can hit more consistent shots. I can shoot it faster and get a faster time to kill. However, close range, which I didn't say in that video, when you're using double tap close range, like super barrel stuff range, that's when it's going to shine. But again, being super situational, I'd rather not even have it on the gun. So let's move on to the next weapon that's going to be in the A class, which is going to be the Mastiff. And I know a lot of you guys are going to be in the comments, you know, rambling. He said, you know, I'm going to put situational weapons down in the lower ranks. Yes, I am going to do that. However, when a weapon that's as good as the Mastiff, where you don't essentially need attachments for it besides a bolt, and it's going to be hitting 100 plus if your barrel stuff range from it, this gun has to be in the top tier. It's got to be S or A class. The reason I didn't put an S, because obviously you're not going to be able to use it long range. Heck, you're not even going to use it medium range. You can only use it close range, but it's going to be a tank. This gun will lock down all your close range gunfights. And going back to the attachments, the only attachment you really need is a shotgun bolt. That is it. You don't need any hop up. You don't need a sight, for Pete's sake. I mean, I use an iron sight and I think that works fine. Sometimes I use a hollow, maybe even a digi-threat, but for the most part, you don't really need a sight for the Mastiff. It's going to go absolutely justice with the iron sight, and then you just need to find that bolt. Now, the Mastiff is a weapon that you're going to be finding in tournaments, you know, in the higher competitive, not even in ranked, I'm talking about, you know, actual tournaments. The Mastiff is used just like the PK was used. And I think Respawn did a really good job of, you know, balancing out these weapons, especially coming out of a care package into floor loot. They did a great job of balancing it to make it just as good as the PK, if not better. You know, it's a really dominant gun. And I always look past it, actually, until they reverted the shields, where they made shields a little bit less and a quicker time to kill. However, if you're watching this video right now, they did that reverse back. So now that Red Evo is back to 225 HP. Purple is back to 200. Gold is back to 200. They reverted it. They listened to the community. They did a really good job, and I'm happy about that. Actually, leave a comment down below if you guys are happy about that change. I know I am. But I was enjoying my time with the low time to kill and using the Mastiff. I mean, one pump with this close range, you whip out your primary, it's like a 1 to 2 hit kill. I mean, it's pretty much a GG. But still, even with the 200 shields now that are the normal purple, it's still going to go off for you. So definitely try out the Mastiff if you haven't already. And finally, let's take a look at the last weapon in the A class, which is going to be the Devotion. Now, the Devotion is a gun that I shy away from, even though it's really good. It's just a toxic weapon to use. It's sort of like the Spitfire, but a little bit better. Now, right off the rip, when they first dropped the weapon into floor loot from a care package, This weapon the next day over received a slight nerf, which was a damage tick. It went from, I believe, 18 damage to 17 or 17 damage to 16 as a body shot. It was one of those changes. And they also had plans to actually nerf it even more. That's why I put it in the A class and definitely not the S class, because if they have plans to nerf it in the future, I don't want to misconcept you guys with trying to use this gun and then, you know, next week or the following week it's absolute poo-poo. You know, I don't want to do that to you guys. So that's why I put in the A class. It's still a good weapon, don't get me wrong, but it's a gun that I find myself not using, not picking up. I'd rather pick up something else than use this weapon. And that is going to conclude the A class. Finally, what you guys have all been waiting for. I mean, if you could do the math, you already know which guns are going to be in this class, the S class. First weapon in the S class is going to be the R301. This is my baby. This is my go-to. This is my absolute sweetheart, especially now that the R99 is gone. Never seen before. I have to be rocking the R301. This gun is a certified beauty. Long range, I'm covered. Medium range, I'm covered. Close range, I'm covered. Overall, extremely versatile. It's going to lock down all those ranges and do absolute justice during those ranges. But if you're talking about 300 meters out, that's not what I'm saying. But there are some long range situations that this gun can absolutely melt if you have a decent barrel stabilizer on it. But the R301 definitely has to be in the S class. It's up there. Definitely top 1, 2, or 3 weapon. And if you guys haven't been using it in this season, definitely recommend it. Try out the R301, and that's pretty much it. The gun speaks for itself, really. So moving on to the next weapon in the S class is going to be the Prowler. Now the Prowler was extremely dominant in season 5, and I'm actually surprised. I honestly thought they were going to nerf it in season 6, and they didn't. They only nerfed some of the recoil when it's fully auto. So if you have that select fire hop up and you're using it fully automatic, now you're going to have a little bit more recoil to it. I think the horizontal recoil got changed a bit, but even fully auto, even with the slight nerf the Prowler received, it's still dominant fully auto. But now I actually tend to see myself using it more on the burst fire option. You can get lucky and get some nice 2 burst headshot kills with this weapon. That's how fast it kills. It can kill in nearly 2 bursts if you hit every shot in the head. Overall, I think it's extremely dominant mid-range, definitely dominant close range. Long range, it's where it's going to be a little bit, it's going to be a hassle. So overall, its effectiveness, I do think the R301 is better. However, the Prowler is definitely going to be better in different situations than the R301. You know, close range, definitely the Prowler over it. But being so versatile with that close to medium range, that's why I put that Prowler up in the S class. The recoil with burst mode is bare to none, so you're going to be hitting most of the shots with the Prowler, and I had to throw it up there in the S class. It's super dominant. Let's move on to the next weapon in the S class, which is going to be the newest weapon in the game, the Volt SMG. Now, this is actually a really big debate, and I actually wanted to make a debate video, which is better, R99 or R301. But now, since the R99 is in the care package, I couldn't really make that video. So if you guys were wondering, you know, what happened to that video, that's what happened to it. I didn't want to make the debate if it's a care package weapon now. So obviously the R99 is better. But for this season's debate, I might make a video, Prowler versus the Volt SMG. The Volt is it's up there with the Prowler. I mean, it's competing with it. It's super dominant. I tend to find my best weapon combo, at least, is going to be the R301 and the Volt, or the R301 and the Prowler. But the Volt is definitely used in some higher tier rank lobbies. You're going to find some great success with it. It's a hard hitter, and it's definitely a gun that's very well rounded. You could use it even long range, long, medium, and close range. If you have that good recoil control, you're going to be hitting some nice shots with the Volt. And for the last weapon in the S class, it's going to be the Hemlock. Yes, you heard here first. The Hemlock S class. Who said that? Well, Respawn said that after they increased the fire rate. Now it's actually insane. You know, the guns like the M8A7 from Black Ops 3, the fire rate's insane. You can, 2 to 3 burst people, depending on how many shots you hit. But the recoil control, very easy to control. Nothing crazy. Especially when you get a gold stabilizer and a nice optic for the Hemlock. This thing is going to obliterate people. So now this is the gun I was talking about with the best weapon combo. You know, you can mix this gun in over the R301. So I'm not going to be running both. If I'm running R301, it's either going to be the 301 and Prowler or 301 and Volt. But if I'm running Hemlock, it's going to be Hemlock Volt or Hemlock Prowler. You know, it's going to be one of the two. So you got your 2 ARs covered there, Hemlock and 301. And then you got your 2 SMGs covered there, Volt and Prowler. Then it's up to you to decide what you prefer, what you feel most comfortable with, and what you enjoy using. But the Hemlock is up there. You can still use it on semi-auto, even long range. When you're putting that 3 times on it, you want to tap people, pepper them. level up your Evo shield, it's going to go justice. And I think now in Season 6, it's actually, I would say, better than the G7 because it's more versatile. You can do more things with it. You can crank it on semi-auto if you want to pepper people at range, but you can still use it as a constant, well-rounded AR when you put it on that burst mode now. You're not going to find yourself having problems close range because your hip fires are not going to hit because you have so much more potential with it now that your fire rate is increased. But that is going to conclude the Season 6 weapon tier list for Apex Legends. Again, this is all my opinion. I want to hear your guys' down in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed today's video, like rating is always appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe, join the Champion Squad. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. And as always, this has been your boy Sultan. I'm signing off. Peace.